Alright, this video is on determining the domain and range of a function graphically. Just remember that when I talk about domain, what I'm really talking about here is a set of all possible x values. You know, when I talk about range, what I'm really talking about here is a set of all possible y values. So when I look at this first graph, right, we have this function here. If I was asking you to find the domain and I'm looking at the set of all possible x values, I'm really looking at this. You know, the x-axis runs from left to right. So you want to look at the x values where your function has points that are associated with it from left to right. So from here, I'm going to be looking at this, and the first time I see my graph, it starts at -2 for an x value. And since there's a closed circle there, I'm going to include it. So I'm going to write this in interval notation. Remember, when you include a point for interval notation, you use a bracket. So we bracket -2, comma, and then how far out to the right does this go in terms of the x values? Well, this arrow on the end of the function means it goes over to the right forever. It also means it goes up forever. But it's going to the right forever, which means it's going out towards an x value of infinity. It's going forever. And then you never can attain infinity, so we put a parenthesis there because we don't include that value. So the domain from left to right, starting with the x value of -2, and then this goes out forever to the right. For the range, we talk about this in a similar way except for the y values. We want to always talk about it from lowest to highest. And, you know, the y-axis is here, the lowest y value that our function starts at. Well, it starts right here at this y value. Well, this y value here is 0. And I include it because there's a closed circle, right? So it's going to be a bracket 0 up to, well, how high up does this graph go? Well, don't forget this arrow means not only does it go over to the right forever, it also goes up forever. So even though it's going very slowly, you know, the y values are going towards infinity. So this would be to infinity with a parenthesis. So the range is the y values from lowest to highest. The lowest y value, if I follow this up here, is right here when y equals 0. The highest, well, this arrow continues on forever, so it goes to infinity. We also ask you about some other properties of the graph. The X-Intercept, remember, is where the graph will intersect the x-axis, or will touch the x-axis. In this case, the coordinates we have here are this point right here. This is the x-axis, so the x value is -2. The y value there is 0. Remember, this is an ordered pair, right? It's not an interval notation, so an ordered pair always has parentheses around it. Here, this was intervals. This is just a point. I'm talking about -2, 0 is a point on the graph. For the y-intercept, we're talking about where the graph crosses the y-axis. In our case, you know, this crosses the y-axis at a y value of 1. So the coordinates there, the x value is 0 always for the y-intercept, and the y value is 1, so 0, 1. And then when I say f of 2 equals, what I'm really saying is, if we call this function f of x, I'm saying the function value when x equals 2. In other words, what's the y value when x equals 2? Well, if I'm looking at this, the x value is 2. Going up here, the y value looks like it's at 2. So from a graph, we can determine different properties. Mainly we're talking about domain and range here, but I want to make sure you remember how to find the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and then evaluating the function at a point. For the next one, all right, again, starting with the domain. Domain talks about what kind of values. We're talking about x values. So I'm looking at my graph and I want to see where are the first x values that are used. So from left to right is the x-axis. You always go from lowest to highest. So from the left, the first time I see my graph have a value where the x's are is at -4. Because it's an open circle, I don't include it, so I need a parenthesis, -4. And then, comma, how far out to the right do these x values go? Well, this arrow doesn't only mean that it goes up forever, it also goes over forever. So this is -4 to infinity. Remember, parenthesis always on the side with infinities. This always goes to the right forever for the x values. Something to point out, even though we don't include -4, you still have to start at -4. You can't start at -3. Sometimes people do that. And the reason is because there's x values between -3 and -4 in here. That the function does, you know, have corresponding y values for it, where the function does exist. So we start at -4, not including it. That's what the parenthesis means. And it goes out all the way to the right forever to infinity. For the range, we're talking about y values. So for the y values, we want these from lowest to highest. The lowest y value I have is down here at the bottom of the graph. So that y value is at -9. And do I include it? Well, the line going through it means it's included. So we put a bracket negative 9. That means you're including it. And then how high up does this go in terms of the y values? Well, following this graph up, the arrow means it goes up forever, so it goes up to infinity. And then once you have that, you know, now we can answer the questions about the x-intercept and the y-intercept. The x-intercept, where does it cross the x-axis? Well, it looks like it crosses the x-axis right there at 7. So this would be the coordinates, 7, 0. Again, parentheses around it because it's a coordinate. The x value is 7. The y value with the x-intercept is always 0. For the y-intercept, where does it cross the y-axis? Well, it crosses the y-axis right here. What are the coordinates there? Well, the x value is 0 for the y-intercept. And then negative 9 is the y value, so 0, negative 9 is where it crosses the y-axis, where the y-intercept is. And f of 4. F of 4 means you want to find the y value when x equals 4. So saying x equals 4, follow to your graph where the y coordinate associated with that would be, which would be here. Following that over, I see that it's negative 6. In other words, 4, negative 6 is on my graph. Taking a look at the next one. So letter C here. We got this graph here, and again they're asking us to find the domain and the range. When I do that, right, for the x values, I'm looking from left to right. Now this arrow here going downward doesn't only mean that, you know, the y values are going downward forever. It also means that this is going out to the left forever. It's just going very slowly. So the lowest x value you're going to have, really, if this goes out forever to the left, is going towards negative infinity. And we put a parenthesis, negative infinity, because you don't include the negative infinity. It's not a value you can attain. All right, just telling you that it goes out forever to the left. Following this graph all the way to the right, well, this goes forever to the right. Even though this goes downward forever, that's the y values. But this arrow also means it goes to the right forever, which is what we're looking for the x values. So negative infinity to infinity. You could also say all real numbers. But all the x values have an associated y value, in other words. For the range, well, actually, before I talk about the range, for the domain here, be careful not to pick negative 9 to 9. Sometimes you'll pick that by mistake. Remember, you have to look at where these arrows are, telling you that it goes out forever in both directions. For the range, we want the lowest y values to the highest. Well, the lowest y values down here, all these arrows means it goes down forever. So we're going all the way to negative infinity. So I need a parenthesis, negative infinity, again, because you can't include the infinity, so that's why I have parentheses there. And then how high up does this go? Well, following this up, it goes all the way up to, it looks like the highest y value we have is at 8, so negative infinity to 8. And do we include 8? Well, the line goes through it, which means we do, so you need a bracket there. You know, if it had an open circle, then you wouldn't include it, and you put a parenthesis. But since the line goes right through it, we know we're including that point. For the x-intercept, all right, now we want to know where this crosses the x-axis. In this case, we have two of them, right? There's one here, and there's one there. And that's okay. You can have more than one x-intercept. You can't have more than one y-intercept to be a function, though. So the x-intercepts, where does it cross? Well, it crosses at x equals negative 9, so that'd be the point negative 9, comma 0. Remember, the y-coordinate is always 0 for the x-intercept. And then what's the coordinate to this other point? Well, it's 9, 0. So we had two, and that's okay. You can have two x-intercepts, right? It crosses the x-axis at those 2 points. For the y-intercept, where does this cross the y-axis? Well, the y-intercept on this graph crosses right there. It looks like the point is, remember, x value is always 0 for the y-intercept. The y value here is 8. Remember, these are ordered pairs when we talk about x and y-intercepts. They're not intervals. If I'm looking for f of negative 4, that's telling you the x value is negative 4. Find the associated y value. So if I go to the x value of negative 4, I follow this up, the y value that goes along with it, well, it looks like that is 6. So f of negative 4 equals 6. For question D, all right, same question, finding domain and range. And you may want to pause the video just to make sure that you can try to do this on your own, and then take a look at the solution. But when we look at this, for the domain, we're talking about all possible x values from left to right. Where's my lowest x value? The first time my graph has an x value associated with it is at negative 3. And do I include it? Well, it's an open circle, so you put a parenthesis because you do not include it. So parenthesis negative 3. right? And then how far out to the right does this go? Well, it starts from -3 and you're following it over. Well, it stops right here at an x value of, looks like the x value is 3 there. And do I include it? Well, it's a closed circle, so yes, you do. It's part of your graph, so we put a bracket. For the range from lowest to highest, the lowest y value I have, well, it looks like that starts at -4. Open circle means you don't include it, so parenthesis, -4, comma, following this all the way up. The highest y value I have is at 2, right? Goes through that point right there at 2. And since it's a solid line there, we put a bracket. For the x-intercept, where does it cross the x-axis? Well, the x-intercept here looks like it crosses the x-axis right there. The coordinates of that point, the x value is -2, the y value always 0 for the x-intercept. For the y-intercept, where does it cross the y-axis? Well, it crosses at this point here, which looks like it's at 0, 2. And f of -1, when the x value is -1, what's the y value? So here's the x value of -1, the y value looks like it's right there. So following that over, the y value there would be 1. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more. So for this next graph of f of x here, the domain. Remember, this means all the possible x values. Well, from the left, how far out does this go? Well, following from the left, this arrow not only doesn't mean it goes downward forever, it also goes to the left forever. So we're going to start with a parenthesis, -infinity, because it goes all the way out to -infinity, meaning it goes out forever. Parenthesis, because you don't include infinities. And how far to the right does this go? Following this straight across. Well, it goes all the way forever to the right, too. That arrow means it's going, so it's -infinity to infinity. Parenthesis on the end. That's all real numbers, another way of saying that. The range for the y values, right? How low does this graph go? Well, starting from the bottom, this arrow means it's going downward forever, so towards -infinity for the y values. How high up does it go? Well, following this all the way up, it goes all the way up to positive infinity. So the range is also all real numbers. So in this case, the domain and range are the same. They won't always be, but it can be. If I asked you to find the x-intercepts here, let's take a look at this. We've got 1, 2, 3 of them. So that's okay. You can have multiple. So the first x-intercept is at -3, so it'd be -3, 0. The next one is at 1, so that's 1, 0, right? The x value is 1, the y value is 0. And then the next one is at 4, 0, right? Where it crosses the x-axis. The y-intercept, remember that's where it crosses the y-axis. Well, it only crosses the y-axis at one point, right there. Remember, the coordinate for x is always 0 because you're on the y-axis, and the y-intercept is 2, so 0, 2. We'll answer this question down here, f of 3. F of 3 is saying when x equals 3, what's the associated y value? Well, when x equals 3, here's 3. The y value there looks like it's -2, right, following that across. And this last part here, I'm asking all values such that f of x equals 2. When I say all the x values such that f of x equals 2, I'm saying the y value is 2, right? Find the x value that goes along with it. So if the y value is 2, what I'm really doing is I'm following this across, and then I'm going to go down to where it actually tells me what the x value is. So if I'm following this, right, here's the y value of 2. Where does my graph hit? Well, it's there, there, and there. What are the x values for those points? Well, this one here looks like, it's kind of close to -2.5. The x value that goes along with this value 2, well, that's 0. And the last one here, the x value that goes along with this point is 5. Just following these down to where the x values are associated with those points. So if I say all x values such that f of x equals 2, I'm saying y equals 2. What's the x values that go along with the points where the graph crosses at? All right, and we'll just take a look at one more. For this one here, all right, the domain, left to right, we're looking at the x values. Starting from the left, we start at, got -4. It's got an open circle, so a parenthesis, -4. comma, well, how far to the right does it go? Well, it keeps going to the right until here, and then it stops. There's a break, so you have to acknowledge that. So before we get to the next part, where does it stop? Well, it stops at 0, and we put a bracket because it's a closed circle, meaning we're including it. And then how do we pick this back up? Well, we put U for the union, and then we put the rest of this interval. So we start off at, here we've got 3, right, the x value of 3, and do I include it? Well, it's an open circle, so we put parenthesis 3, comma, how far to the right does this go? Well, it goes, the arrow means forever, so to infinity. All right, so this one has a domain that's got, 2 intervals associated with it because there's a split in the graph, right? There's some x values that are not included in between. Make sure you put union in between there. For the range, lowest to highest, well, how low does this graph go? Well, this arrow means it goes downward forever. So we start at negative infinity. Remember, we put a parenthesis in the front there. How high up does this go? Well, it goes up until, looks like we follow this up. It goes until 4, but then it actually keeps going higher, right? So you don't stop here. You don't have to put a break because the value of 4 is used when that circle's closed there. It's also used there. So there's really no break. It keeps going up until you get to that y value of 5. So we have negative infinity to 5, and then there's an open circle there, so it's a parenthesis. So because there's no break in the y values when you go up, you don't have to worry about putting any union there because this does attain all the y values between here and the top. If I was looking for the x-intercept, where's it across the x-axis? Well, in this case, it's at x equals 7, so this would be the point 7, 0. The y-intercept, where's across the y-axis? Well, that's at the point 0, 4, right? Because that's where the y-axis is, or the y-intercept is. And then f of negative 2, when x equals negative 2, we're looking for the y value. The y value there is 2. So hopefully this helped refresh how to find domain and range from a graph. I do have another video on how we'll determine domain algebraically.